story of their impact on one great continental thinker begins here, in of all places the leafy London suburb of Wimbledon. In the year 1803, to improve his English, a German boy came to Nelson House School in Wimbledon High Street. The boy was Arthur Schopenhauer. In Wimbledon, Schopenhauer did indeed perfect his English, but it was here that he also picked up his lifelong aversion to Christianity. Schopenhauer complained bitterly to his parents about the cant and hypocrisy of English religion. He admired Jesus, whom he saw as an ascetic, but he did not like 3 times a Sunday the worldly religion of Jane Austen's England.
If you wish to see with your own eyes what early inoculation of belief does, look at the English. For this they have to thank the clergy, who take care to inculcate all the articles of belief at the earliest age in such a way as to result in a kind of partial paralysis of the brain. This then shows itself throughout their whole life in a silly bigotry. Protestantism has given up the innermost kernel of Christianity by eliminating asceticism. In the end, this results in a doctrine of a loving Father who made the world in order that things might go very pleasantly in it, and in this, of course, he was bound to fail, and who, if only we conform to his will in certain respects, will afterwards provide an even pleasanter world, in which case it is only to be regretted it has so fatal an entrance.
Now and always. Amen.
This may be a good religion for comfortable, married and civilized Protestant parsons, but it is not Christianity.
After Schopenhauer returned to Germany, he lived for a while with his mother at Weimar. There, Goethe encouraged him, and a visiting scholar gave him a translation of the Hindu Upanishads, lofty philosophical poems of about the same date as the New Testament, but previously unknown in the West. These Hindu scriptures confirmed Schopenhauer's opinion that Christianity was narrow and provincial by comparison.
We send the Brahmins, English clergymen, and evangelical linen weavers to show them that they are created out of nothing and ought thankfully to rejoice in the fact. But it is just the same as if we fired a bullet against a cliff. In India, our religions will never take root. The ancient wisdom of the human race will not be displaced by what happened in Galilee. On the contrary, Indian philosophy streams back to Europe and will produce a fundamental change in our knowledge and thought.
In Schopenhauer's study there were 2 figures. The image of the philosopher Kant stood for Kant's doctrine that the world around us is only representation, constructed by our minds from our sense experiences. The Buddha image reminded Schopenhauer that the way to release is by detachment from the world, inner calm, and the extinction of craving.
He who has attained to the denial of the will to live, however poor, joyless, and full of privation his condition may appear externally, is yet filled with inward joy and the true peace of heaven. It is not the restless strain of life, but a peace that cannot be shaken, a deep rest and inward serenity.
Schopenhauer did make one attempt at a job. He got a lectureship at Berlin, and then with typical arrogance put on his own lectures at the same time as Hegel's. He reasoned that if people had any sense, they'd obviously prefer him. Well, they didn't, and he resigned in a huff and turned himself into the cantankerous bachelor of Frankfurt with his rigid 2-hour daily walk by the river. As he says, Schopenhauer's teaching is rather like the Buddha's. This world about us is only representation or appearance. Any order or reality we perceive in it has been put there by our own minds. Science can never penetrate to the inner truth of the world. All it can ever do is connect up appearances. The clue to the world's inner reality lies in the desire or craving that powers our own existence. We and everything else are the expressions and the prisoners of a blind, futile, eternal craving or striving that Schopenhauer calls the will, the struggle to exist. Only by turning it back upon itself and extinguishing it can we reach happiness. But that means our extinction, surely, because for Schopenhauer, consciousness can no more exist without the brain than digestion without the stomach. And yet, at the end, he hints at a kind of impersonal bliss, nirvana.
The ephemeral generations of man are born and pass away in quick succession. Individual men, burdened with fear, want and sorrow, dance into the arms of death. As they do so, they never weary of asking what it is that ails them and what the whole tragic comedy is supposed to mean. They call on heaven for an answer, but heaven stays silent. Instead of a voice from heaven, there come along priests with revelations. But he is still in his childhood who can think that superhuman beings have ever given our race information about the aim of its existence or that of the world. There are no other revelations than the thoughts of the wise, even if these are often clothed in strange allegories and myths, and are then called religions. We freely acknowledge that what remains after the complete abolition of the will is, for those who are still full of the will, assuredly nothing. But also, conversely, to those in whom the will has turned and denied itself, this very real world of ours, with all its suns and galaxies, is nothing.
To the world, the saints are nothing. But then, to the saints, the world is nothing. Okay, is there anything that is something to the saints? Schopenhauer won't answer. We shouldn't have asked the question. His whole book, The World as Will and Representation, was designed to lead up to that final word, nothing. This idea that the highest truths of religion are inexpressible, can't be put into words, are indeed nothing, greatly influenced people like Tolstoy and Wittgenstein. More generally, if you've ever felt that human nature is irreparably flawed, that our chief passion, the sex drive, is too destructive and irrational ever to lead to lasting happiness, that the chief value of art lies in its capacity for a moment to take us out of ourselves, that all existence is on a countdown to extinction, then you're a disciple of Schopenhauer. He influenced generations of artists and writers, and his ideas became diffused through the modern novel, and especially the cinema. He's the original pessimistic Western intellectual. And yet, just because he's so pessimistic, he gives an unfair impression of Indian religion. There were others in his century to whom India came as a joyful liberation. The modern Republic of India was born in 1947.